legal opposition then, and therefore the permanent secretary and his State Department were not able to proceed with that program before the elections. We have been able to at least push this through, and the housing levy is intended to provide an off-take to the people we want to inject capital into building of these houses through the PPP that you spoke about. So it's supposed to be an off-taker to these housing programs for those who are able to buy the houses from the various incomes. So to those who are not able, then that off-take, the government will take the market risk for those who are not able to sell off all the units that they so built. In your estimation, the program is supposed to employ all cadres of employment. Housing site is a site where you get a highly skilled architect, engineer, and semi-skilled masons interpreting the same plan. So therefore we are thinking we will provide employment to the various cadres. Do you think that is still a feasible way of putting money back into the economy to allow some bit of economic activity through labor-intensive investment? The last question I had was to you that where's the presentation? I had it here. So you suggested that we reduce prices of some of the commodities. Do you have the specific commodities that we think we need to reduce prices on? And then lastly, Kwame, we faced, by the time we took over, let me remind you, some of the big members here are speaking like Kenya Kwanza has been in government for 100 years, like Ganu. We have been in government for 1 year. President Ruto took office in September last year. And you've all addressed the debt question very effectively. That we were faced with a heavy debt burden. And I saw David D's tweet saying that it is a miracle that we have not defaulted. Where does that default take us to? And the president said we will not take domestic borrowing to pay salaries, so that we continue, because the rate lately we are paying 15% plus for domestic borrowing. So where does that debt question fit into this whole economic ecosystem? Because at one point we want to be an A-rated country in terms of debt repayment. We are inviting FDIs. If you see the president's blitz across the globe, it's about foreign direct investment from Saudi Arabia, from Indonesia, from the United States, on various sectors of the economy. So if today the country has poor ratings, and therefore, what does that leave us in terms of our debt patterns? Do we just abandon them and say now we reduce taxes, remove the fuel development levy, which was supposed to backstop the SGR, we remove this, we remove that? Simply the kind of what Ishungwa called the knee-jerk reactions to a crisis. So we've bitten the bullet. We don't know whether we've bitten the right bullet.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is to the control of budget. As ways of mitigating on the cost of living, you have made a proposal that we should increase allocations to existing programs like cash transfer schemes. Maybe from where you are sitting, I think the current allocation is 2,000, and I agree with you that that's really minimum. Do you have any figure you can throw to us on what increase you are looking at, from 2,000 to what? Related to that is, there are also a number of Kenyans who are on the lower cadre of earning. You had somebody mention that the minimum salary is at 15,000. And maybe Kenyans earning 15,000, 50,000 are the ones who are hardest hit by the rising cost of living. Can you maybe give us a proposal on what should be the ideal minimum wage for Kenyans that can mitigate the current rise in cost of living? Number two, I think you've really been candid. You have opened up on the cash situation for the country, and you have mentioned, and I believe rightly so, that reduction of our deficit financing is a solution to will be a solution to our current debt crisis. And from the figures you have given, it's clear that as a country we are really facing a cash crunch. So we must tighten our belts. We must put some measures in place, maybe like what Lyndon Johnson did in the US in 1965, where there was direct cuts on particular ministries. I think the hardest hit in the US government then was the defense ministry. Now, what in your view should be our top 3 priorities on government cuts on expenditure in government? From where you're sitting, if you had to propose 3 priorities in cuts on government expenditure. Finally, from your presentation, what I've gotten is that, and I think that's the law, the PFM Act requires that budgets be contained within the expenditure ceilings of the approved mid-term expenditure framework. I think that's the legal position, and I fully agree with you. But it seems the prevailing situation is that the current budgets do not comply. The question I'm asking now, just as a lawyer, are these current budgets then, as passed, illegal? Going by what you have presented to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll take one also, and I don't know whether it's to anyone.
Sorry, I forgot one thing.
Yes.
With your permission. Now, you mentioned something on hiring spree by counties, yeah? And you mentioned that some are actually spending 47% of their allocations on P&E, personal emoluments. Now, you have left out the situation from national government. You just gave us a position of what is prevailing in counties, but you have not given us the situation on national government. And these are the spiral effect on counties. The Senate last week, we had a situation where some governors have made a petition that because national government is taking in many advisors, because the national government has made proposals for budgetary allocation for spouses of certain kind of office holders within the government, the governors also want to get the same allocation for their spouses. So there is that, there is that spiral effect downwards, They say they have seen in the budget spouses are being allocated 500 million. They also want to be allocated. So can you also give us a true picture, the situation as it is on the national government in terms of the recruitments, advisors for the big office holders and the likes? Thank you.
Catherine had something.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Margaret, for your presentation. I think it's been an eye-opener. And to this team, I think we have listened to the cream of this country in terms of presentations on the economic status of this country. Dr. You are very clear, and you have progressively told us how the economy has depreciated from year in, year out, progressively. I think from the last 3 years, it's been on a deteriorating level. And you attributed it to poor predictions. That was clearly from you. How, in your own wisdom, is these poor predictions going to be curbed? Especially now being the director in the control of budget. You also were very clear about the bonds that are now at 18%, and you said it's very, it's actually pathetic. Anything that you can do about that, maybe be able to put it in your paper. And also, Dr. Masinde, thank you. You also mentioned something on the exemption of tax, and I think I heard you very clearly. What about the exemption of tax? Is it that the people who are being exempted from tax don't deserve it, or there's corruption in a manner in which they're sorted out? And interestingly, again, you also talked about overlapping of mandates by ministerial, by different functions from different ministries. So can you be able to point out for us which are these overlapping specific functions that we can address in this? Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Probably I'll start off with the control of budget in relation to what Senator Mugeni was asking on two issues. You mentioned the prevalence of manual payrolls in counties where staff are being paid manually and in most cases in cash. I would want to know then what is your role as a controller of budget and how do you help the country to deal with that issue of manual payrolls? And also the question of pending bills. As you rightly say, those pending bills should constitute the first charge to the exchequer. But your office continues to approve payments for current contracts, probably on the basis of kickbacks that governors and their sidekicks in the counties are getting, at the expense of pending bills. And control of budget, you agree with me, even the current lot of governors, very few of them are settling pending bills. Especially those who have joined the first time, they say they are pending bills that were incurred by their predecessors, and therefore they do not settle them. You have all agreed, or rather what came to me, across to me, from all the presentations is that this country is yet to recover from the COVID pandemic and the effects of that COVID pandemic to our economy. The Institute of Economic Affairs, you have also rightly put it that inflation at the moment is higher than the wage increments as they are. And my question to you, Kwame, would be, then is our problem not an income problem per se, other than, because inflation, as you all again rightly said, there is inflation that is informed by certain things that are beyond our control. But isn't our problem an income problem that so many Kenyans, as you all rightly say, the economy is yet to recover from the effects of the COVID pandemic, so many Kenyans are still out of employment and therefore lack an income. And it would be my view then that our problem is more of an income problem than actually the cost of living per se. And with that in mind, we have had suggestions. And I will draw reference to the presentation by our colleague Arthur Muliro on infrastructure investment, what he said and what I was pretending that probably the housing agenda and that heavy investment in housing is part of what will spur economic activity and generate incomes by creating jobs for many Kenyans to help deal with the problem of the cost of living. If we were to do what some of the things that Kwame referred to as unintended consequences of certain measures, would there be unintended consequences if, for instance, we decided to do away with the housing levy and decided to abandon the housing agenda altogether? Would there be even a huge ramification in terms of unintended consequences of that decision? On tax reforms, the control of budget, you spoke about registration of the informal sector and imposing tax on their businesses with a view to broadening the tax base. And I think, again, listening to all of you across, including the presentation by Aka, who even spoke to the agricultural sector, and I agree with him. For instance, today farmers have harvested, we are told, close to 61 million bags. And they will make a handsome return on it. What's their contribution to tax? We have used government resources or taxpayers' money to subsidize fertilizer for them. The decrease in terms of the amount that they will be able to sell their maize may not be as significant, but what is their contribution in tax? And probably I think that's what you are alluding to. How do we incorporate all the other Kenyans who are not paying tax to become taxpayers? Because again, it is my view, and that is my personal view, that those of us who have access to the microphone are the loudest. But there are also those who are not loud and are quiet, but are also not paying taxes. how would you propose that we incorporate them in the tax paying bracket, especially what I think the controller of tax, controller of budget, not of tax, also alluded to in terms of those who are in the informal sector, who are also benefiting from the social contract between government and the people, but they are not contributing in terms of their responsibility to pay taxes. I would want to hear measures you would want. Somebody spoke about reducing the railway development levy and the IDF fees. I think it was you, Kwame. I don't know, Masinde. Masinde, if I remember right, I think there was some reduction in the Finance Act of 2023 on the RDL and IDF. I think IDF from 1.5 to something. You probably would jog our minds in terms of, because those are some of the areas you are proposing that we could touch on. And I thought we did do that in the Finance Bill of 2023. What was the other thing I had? Yes, last week but one, this committee sought to retreat outside town or within town in a venue that would have a lot of time. We could not find accommodation in Nairobi. We could not find accommodation in Naivasha. We could not find accommodation in Mombasa. We had to retreat to some nice place somewhere else outside of the known destinations. And we got the feeling from procurement, people who are trying to procure a place for us, that the accommodation sector was now slowly recovering. And I do recall some time back I also had a quick trip to Mombasa. I could not find accommodation. I had to get an Airbnb. The growth of the Airbnb sector in Nairobi and major urban centers also points in a way to a recovery of that accommodation and restaurant business. And therefore probably we're on the right trajectory, and that is to Kwame. I don't know where then that, does that give us hope as a country that at least, as much as we have not recovered, we are on the right trajectory in terms of moving towards recovery in view of what we are seeing? Or is it a one-off event? I don't know whether it's a big season of tourism. Lastly, you all spoke at length to social safety nets. A need to deepen and increase our social safety nets. Our again speak to measures taken by this government, including the measures around universal health coverage, increment of the people who are the elderly and the vulnerable groups of the cash transfer program. And I agree with Senator Mogeni, the quantum of 2,000 or 2,500 may not be much, but increasing those numbers, increasing the people who will be under universal health coverage, especially the most vulnerable in our society, that have been defined in the Act as the indigents of our society, having to have universal health coverage free of charge catered for by the government, incrementing food to school-going children across the country, increasing that, doubling actually that number from 4 million to almost 8 million children under food sustenance in schools. Will those again constitute measures that may not be adequate, but given the circumstances of our economy, do you think these are social security safeguards that will help us sustain ourselves, at least in the medium to long term, as we hope for a full recovery of the economy? Lastly, Kwame, are there quick fixes, or do we have to bear the pain for now to have what will be sustainable economic recovery? Thank you. Maybe, Controller, if you could start, then we move to Kwame and Masinde in that order. Just in relation to that issue of pending bills, the labor market, again, what is the role of your office in ensuring that the county governments, especially, the expenditures that they are incurring in terms of their budgets goes towards helping the economy to recover? And I have in mind what I have seen, for instance, in my own county. Instead of investing in what would be sustainable economic programs, governors are very quick to invest in what would be more populist political programs. I have seen in my county, for instance, the governor heavily investing in dishing out chicken chicks, what they call improved kienyeji chicks, 5 of them to households, giving piglets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 youth, at the expense of what would be sustainable economic interventions that will help our economy to recover. What is the role of your office in ensuring that our county governments are investing in sustainable economic engagements that will help not just the people but also the economy to recover? Because it is your office that then approves some of these expenditures. Why would you be approving expenditure for what are constitute political handouts at the expense of investing in infrastructure, at the expense of investing in social safety nets, like hospital provision of drugs and construction of hospitals, provision of water, things that Kwame will tell you are more beneficial to the country in the long term than what are more of political engagements. The same thing with us, Parliament. And I say this as a parliamentarian. You have spoken and given us figures of how much the political class in this country is spending in terms of travel and domestic hospitality. What is the role of your office then in curtailing the appetite of county assemblies, parliament, and the executive in dealing with some of these rather populist things to the political class, but very expensive to the ordinary Kenyan?
Thank you very much once again, co-chairs. It's quite a mouthful, but I'll run through them as fast as I can. And I'm going to start with how the high taxation has contributed to capital flight. This was raised by one of the chairs. And indeed, we have seen high taxation leading to high prices and therefore leading to inflation. So sometimes we do not link the high taxation to the high prices and therefore to the capital flight. And I want to give just one example which will show us the direction in which we are moving. Park fees. This morning, in one of the groups that I am in, I saw the ladies saying, why would I pay $200 to enter the park when I can see the same animals from the Tanzanian side by paying very little? So this is just an example. But some of those things we are doing have a ripple effect. So they affect us in more than one way, and I know my colleagues here will be weighing in on that. Now, in terms of integrity, how can we raise integrity? We must do a root cause analysis. We must say, where did it start raining on us? But let me again just give 2 examples that are making us move into those areas of loss of integrity. One is insecurity. What do I mean by insecurity? If employees, for instance, are not sure whether they'll be employed tomorrow, what do? They, of course, try to gather as much as possible so that they can run away. 2, if employees are insecure in terms of, again, like how long they'll be doing what they're doing, these issues will create uncertainty, and that uncertainty creates loss of integrity. The fear and uncertainty is one of those areas. The other area is borrowing without a plan. This one, I'm using it in a very colloquial sense, in the sense that I have been approving payments of public debt, and I've looked at what we are paying for. Many of those things cannot be identified. You just find a name of why we borrowed. You cannot trace it to anything. You cannot tell what the money was spent for, and therefore there was no economic gain from that borrowing. It is just like taking Fuliza and then you go to the bar and drink it all. You go back home, you'll find your family hungry, and you'll find all those other things. So I don't really need to gainsay this. That is what we have been doing for a long time. I have discussed with the Auditor General, and we have said, can we track these loans and see what we did with them? Yes, I think it will help us going forward. But just so you know, honorable members, I did a report to the Committee on Public Debt, and they told me, please check on the loans which we have taken recently in 2022. Tell us if we can link them with a project. They were shocked. We could not. We found some ambiguous definitions of the loans, and the Treasury could not tell us what really we were going to do with those loans. So unless we wake up and link our borrowing to actual economic activity, will not come out of this hole. That I can say without fear of contradiction. Now, Honorable Opio Wandai asked about Article 223 and what kind of amendments we are looking at. And what I can say here is that Article 223 has no problem on its own. In fact, the way it's crafted is very okay, and it can serve this country just the way it is. But here we are talking of abuse. We are talking of preparing budgets which are approved on 30th June, and on 5th of July, I find applications for Article 223. That clearly is an abuse of the system, because we are saying that every once in a while, we will find this item which is not budgeted for, or for which the budget is insufficient, and then we'll need to fall back on Article 223. But you will find people are making applications to employ, people are making applications to repair vehicles, to refurbish buildings. Really, those are some of the items that should not belong to Article 223.
Maybe you would tell us, since you are the controller of budget.
Yes.
And I hear you and I can relate to what you are saying, having been a chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. What then would you recommend to this committee, whether it's legislative intervention or constitutional safeguards, that one would protect the country from that abuse of Article 223? And I say this with all due respect to yourself. I remember earlier this year or late last year, when you had to share with the country the kind of intimidation that you had to go through under the last regime to approve payments that were illegal and were basically constituted an abuse of that Article 223. And it's the same thing you're speaking to, Controller, when you speak about loans that cannot be tied to anything. And this always happens in the run-up to an election. And 2022 was no exception. What specific measures then would you ask this committee to help your office and help the country with, in terms of probably a constitutional safeguard to your office, so so that you never have to go, not yourself, no other officer serving in your office will ever have to go through what you went through. And we completely stole abuse of that Article 223. Because as you rightly say, and I agree with you, Article 223 is in its rightful place in the Constitution. It is its abuse.
Thank you very much once again, Chair. And
I'm sure
I
you can
wouldn't-
tolerate that interruption very many.
Yeah.
no problem, no problem. So I don't think I can give a blanket recommendation. What I've been doing actually, and I do that all the time, is to go on a case-by-case basis. But we must have the political will to say, let us budget in an authentic manner and follow those budgets. Because by the time we are falling back on Article 223, we must be sure that this is something that could not be done within the budgeting framework. So I am seeking that Parliament, when they are interrogating the budgets, to ensure that those accounting officers are disclosing everything that they need to do. Now, this one does not need any addition to the law. It is what I could say, it's an issue of integrity. So, what I'm doing right now with the National Treasury, who are the generators of this, is to, I respectively tell them that this cannot go through under Article 223. And what we have been doing is, if this is a legitimate request, then it goes through the normal supplementary. So we are doing it on a case-by-case basis. If we went blanket, it is very possible that something will come up that requires to be done under Article 223, and then we would not address it appropriately.
Maybe, and you forgive me,
Yes.
because I am very keen on this. I say that informed by where I have come from. You also took us through a presentation, if members will remember, that was showing the variances between the BPS estimates. The estimates are stabled by the National Treasury and maybe that's why it begins to beat us as a country.
Yes, yes.
Because if you ask me, and Kwame will bear me witness, and Masinde, we're in the month of October, November now. The budget policy statement and budget making process has already begun. But
For next year.
for the next financial year. But what we do is a copy and paste budgeting process. So by the time people come to actual budget making now in April to June, that's when they realize there is something we never budgeted for. I'll give you a case example this financial year. We put in a lot of money to subsidize farmers in fertilizer inputs and other inputs. We had blessings of the rains, and Honorable Eugene Omalo will bear me witness that farmers in Trans Nzoia and the North and South Rift have done very well in terms of producing maize. But the Ministry of Agriculture never planned for maize dryers until when the Met Department announces there's going to be El Nino, and we are caught flat-footed, and we start running around helter-skelter now looking for maize dryers. You buy those maize dryers at a more probably pricier price, since it's a last-minute procurement. So what is it, maybe Margaret and His Excellency, you have to bear with me on this one. What is it that we can do to make that process more efficient? And maybe you don't have to answer now, maybe think through it together with Kwame and the others, because we are looking at things that will be sustainable, things that will help us in the country, so that we don't end up with huge fiscal deficits, huge borrowing, huge debt financing, and end up spending all our money paying debt that we should have avoided. Maybe it may not be a question you could answer now, but you can think through it, send us your thoughts, probably together with the others. How can we make the budget making process for our country more efficient and more effective?
Thank you.
Co-chair, I just wanted to propose that perhaps we allow them to answer, then we do another round,
Okay.
so that we don't disrupt their.
Well guided.
Thank you.
Forgive me, I just happen to be too passionate about these budget issues.
Thank you, thank you. I would then like, in that case, and I agree with the chair that it is something we can look at actually in another forum, so that we address these issues effectively. Let me move to the dollar issue raised by Honorable Omar, in which he has said that there are actually a lot of dollars which are being hidden away in the economy, because then our currency is depreciating all the time. Now, I'm just wondering, a lot of these dollars that we get come from the diaspora. Now, I'm effectively informed, and I think rightly so, that right now there are a lot of panya routes through which dollars come in. I mean the panya routes in the sense that people have devised methods where dollars can be repatriated, say, to South Africa, and then the money finds its way to Kenya in some way, so that it evades the banking system. So if it doesn't go through the banking system, then you may not catch up with it. So there are a lot of dollars coming in through the black markets, and because of the way the currency is depreciating, nobody wants to bring them to the open market because they want the rates to go up. Let me make a suggestion of what I think we can do. I think there should be some form of amnesty, just the same way we have done with the income tax. Can we have some amnesty for people to bring in dollars so that they can be received without any penalties? That is one thing I hope the committee can look at. Now, then there was a question on housing levy in terms of the housing plans and how this was initially stopped and what was intended for offtake then never took off. Allow me to speak like an ordinary citizen in this one. The citizens have lost trust. Now, what happens if every time you speak to someone, they do not keep their word? I think you will not be in a position to trust them the next time they speak. Why I'm saying this is that I keep my ears open a lot of times when people are arguing, my friends on the golf course and all that, and I hear them say, who tells you we'll get these houses? So that lack of trust is making people not to trust the process. It is a very noble idea, and it is supposed to help the citizens. It is supposed to create jobs. It is even supposed to create, all those nice things. But how can we work on improving the trust of the citizens? This is a bit abstract. I don't know how we can even measure the trust, but I'm talking from personal experience because I've been hearing what people are saying on the WhatsApps, on Facebook. Just listen to what the people are saying. They are either completely lost trust or they are losing trust. So that is something we need to look at. Now, which items would we be looking at reducing? Commodities. Supposing we were given by the magic wand and told, pick 3 items that you would like reduced. Here, I will be looking at the food basket of those who are in say the bottom of the pyramid. What are the things that they use? Something to cook with. So that is one area we'll be looking at. I've been looking at the prices of kerosene, the price of maca, the price of cooking fuel generally is a really sore area because no one can do without it. Then we are looking at sending money. You all know that the cost of sending M-Pesa right now has really gone up. Most of the people who have come to the urban areas, who are working in lowly jobs, probably they are security guards, they are maids, you call it. They have to send some money home to their parents, to their children, because they can't live with them. Now imagine when we impose and increase excise taxes on sending money, then we are squarely hurting these people. The third thing I would be looking at is VAT on food. And I've looked at all sorts of taxes here. VAT on food. Now, when we introduce VAT on unga, a staple food, then you know the very lowly are going to suffer. So if I had three things to choose, those are the things I would choose. Let me move to Senator Omugeni. I'm sure there'll be round two, like we were told. So here we are looking at proposals on allocations to cash transfers. This is pleased to increase the amount. And these people are not many. I think when the last time was over 70s were counted, they were not very many. And they are they have less time with us, isn't it? So even if we double this amount to 4,000, I think would really help them because they are also subject to inflation and they can only buy so little sugar, so little salt. The 2,000 cannot buy anything. And then it is delayed for many, many months. So if there is anything we would do, it is to increase that amount and give it in a more timely manner. There are these low cadre employees earning the 15,000 who are really hardly hit. And the senator asked if there is an ideal wage that I would suggest. I think I would rather give this to the economists. I don't think this will be good for an accountant. As an accountant, I look at reducing costs. But the economists, I think, will chip in on the ideal minimum wage. Reduction of deficit financing, indeed, we know that we are in a cash crunch. But this cash crunch, ni ile ya kujitakia. Because, like I told you before, we have been borrowing and partying with borrowed money. That is why we are where we are. So we must look very carefully at our spending and reduce this spending. Some of the areas that could be in for budget cuts, and I think the government is already taking measures, thanks to my reports, I think in part, I've been reporting where we are spending most. Travel both domestic and international. Then secondly, refurbishments. Yeah, there are many times people are throwing away curtains and bringing in new ones, and a lot of issues like that are very wasteful. Then thirdly, I would be looking at something like the fuel. And here fuel, I'm looking at the kind of vehicles that we buy vis-a-vis the kind of journeys that we make. So look at it in terms of why go to Mombasa if you can go to Naivasha. And I think a concerted effort across the economy can bring a lot of savings in that. Under the PFM, expenditure ceilings, we were looking at the current budgets that do not comply with the PFM ceilings. Are they then illegal? Now, I would like to disqualify myself from the illegality in this particular instance, because when we look at national government, we have the sectors, and sectors have leaders, and these things go through public participation. All I can ask is, can these sector leaders do their job? Because if they did their job properly, then we wouldn't be discussing here about illegalities. And circulars are there. I think if they are followed, we should be having the kind of budgets that we expect. Hiring sprees in the counties, which are up to 47. How about the national government in terms of employment? Yes, I've been doing both national and county reports on personnel emolument. So far, the income ratio to the employment has been okay in national government. But watch this space. I'll be reporting on the first quarter. If I find that it has exceeded, you will see it in my reports. Now, going to the counties, let's all appreciate that the counties have a lower income base. So the denominator that they are using to calculate the ratio is much lower. So what are we saying here? The implication is that if the monies to the counties were higher, then probably we would be talking of a lower percentage. If the on-source revenue raised at the counties was higher, it means that the denominator will be higher, and therefore the percentage will be lower. So the message I've been giving to the counties is, please try to increase your inflows, because if you increase your inflows, then it means you can accommodate more employment. So that same level of employment would be a much lower percentage if the revenues were higher. So that's what I can say. Now, from Madam Catherine, thank you for the compliment. We have suffered a long time from poor forecasting, and this is an area, please, I would ask the committee to talk to the National Treasury on a very serious note. The exaggerations are in the National Treasury, and let me just give one example. When I was doing the budget for Consolidated Fund Services, this is where my salary is paid from. I found out that my salary was budgeted at 3 times what I'm paid. Wow. I am the only state officer in my institution. So there's nothing like confusion there. I'm all alone. So I asked them, why is the budget showing 3 times what my annual salary is? And it was like that for all the state officers.
What was the answer, madam?
Chairman, I have not received the answer to date.
Integrity. They have not answered me why they budgeted 3 times what I'm supposed to be earning. So now, if that is only my salary, what I'm saying, we don't know what else is dodgy in there. And then when it comes to the supplementary, these amounts are then reallocated to other areas. So, honorable members, I'm asking you to talk to the Treasury in a very matter of fact manner to look at the way they are handling the budgeting. I think the problem is there. There's a big problem. Yes. Then let me move to the manual payrolls and what is the role of the COB in terms of manual payrolls. Now, my role, as per the mandate given by the Constitution, I think I don't have to repeat it. My role is advisory as far as this is concerned. So because I look after budget implementation and because I report on a regular basis, I am in contact with this information. So
First of all is that when the counties prepare their budgets, they bring the drafts to my office. We analyze and we advise them. Every so often, they will tell us we have had and we have made the adjustments. Now, when it comes to implementation, there is a lot of mischief. They'll always go and do other things. And then they'll always prepare a supplementary budget to try and sanitize what has been done. So my office has insisted on always trying to bring them to the straight and narrow in spite of this. But you can imagine that because we have so many counties to begin with, and all of them are doing something, my office is extremely busy trying to check these things and ensuring that they are not going beyond the ceilings. Now we have a system now of registering all workers at the county. The UHR, there is a united HR system which is taking over from the IPPD and which has more features to capture employees and to avoid ghost workers, so to say. So this system is in progress and within which they have complied with this system. This system is being run by the State Department of Public Service. So they keep complaining that that State Department takes very long to implement their requests. But so what we do is that we are consistently and continuously ensuring that they are putting more and more staff onto that system, of course with a deadline of this year. They are supposed to have complied fully by the end of this financial year. On pending bills, honorable members, like I told you, the pending bills are very high and the causes are many. Now, yet the COB pays current bills instead of the old bills. I would like to respond to this that I don't pay. Instead, what I do, I approve withdrawals for the payment of pending bills. Now, there is a hidden gem there, in that if I approve the withdrawal, I have no control on who is paid. The money will go to the county, and then the accounting officer will pick different payees and pay them. If you remember, sometime last financial year, I had requested the central bank to give me access to the bank statements of the counties so that I would be tracking these payments. That became a cropper because the Council of Governors threatened to go to court. They could not allow any such thing because there's a lot happening in those statements that apparently I'm not supposed to see. So the long and short of it, Honorable, I have ensured that the counties bring me a list of approved, eligible, we call them eligible pending bills. Along with that, they give me a payment plan and they tell me this is what we think we can accommodate within our cash flows. Now, what I do from my office is to implement that payment plan. When they are bringing the requisitions, I make sure that whatever they say they'll be paying per month is included in their requisitions. Or else, I hold their requisitions until they comply. So I make it a kind of policing affair, which shouldn't be the case, but because they are very difficult in complying, then those problems are there. Now, the other problem that I must mention at this point is the counties are always saying that they don't receive their money in good time. So even when they give a payment plan, if they do not receive their monies at the expected time, then they fail to service those pending bills. So that is still another small elephant in the room. Then there is a third elephant, and this third elephant is called ineligible pending bills. These are people who have worked and they are owed money. But for one reason or another, their documentation is incomplete. Either they did not get the proper LPO, or they worked based on good faith. Now they cannot be paid. These are the people you have had who are in real distress, others are dying, and you know, a lot has happened. You are never going to get paid. At the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council, we have agreed in the last meeting that there should be an intergovernmental committee which will be looking at ineligible pending bills to see which ones can be, you know, ratified through some legal process so that they can be paid, and which ones should be thrown out completely. So that is an ongoing process. Let me move to tax reforms and what we are going to get in form of taxes, saying when we assist the farmers, and this came from the co-chair there. I think this is more of a self-examination where we are saying what services can we provide to the farmers to ensure that they actually sell their produce and get the returns that they expected. I'm sure even if they don't pay directly, these people are going to turn around the economy by spending and therefore paying VAT. So if you have, that is what I would say. You don't have to tax them directly.
Without interrupting, I thought Kimani wanted them taxed. It's okay.
I think that's what he was saying, Chair, but I'm opposing that and saying, let's improve the economy and let's improve the spending power. These farmers will spend all that money in the shops and in the bars. They buy beer.
In actual control of budget,
yes,
it is a contribution that they make to the economy. I wanted you to allude to, or I was hoping you'd allude to.
Okay.
Because we are talking about inflation that is largely being driven by food prices. So if the farmers make their contribution in terms of being able to provide us with cheaper food, then they have made their contribution in the social contract that Arthur was talking about.
Okay.
I think you've answered it. So there is that contribution, and then there is the purchasing power that will be in their hands. I think the questions have run out now. I need to give...
You've done very well. You don't have to answer everything. Some of them were just general comments, like I'll make one at the tail end.
Yes, there's just one Chair, which on sustainability of economic engagements, and I think there was this question that about the counties, that in terms of what they are doing, is there sustainable development, and what is the role of my office? And I thought I should just contribute to this by saying that the counties have an elaborate planning framework. They start with the County Integrated Development Plan, from which the annual development plans are derived. So if they get it right and ensure there is proper public participation, AP as we call it, then the annual development plans will be derived from that. Then additionally, my office is ensuring now, and this we have made our duty, to ensure that the program-based budgeting, where we link the spending to particular outcomes, is done properly. Then I think we'll be home and dry.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, I'm conscious about the shortage of time and the pressure of time, so I'll answer only 4 questions and I won't take more than 10 minutes. So I think Honorable Kimani Juma asked me a very direct question, which is basically about widening the tax base. I think we need to make a conscious choice, which is that if you've decided that we can subsidize farmers as taxpayers, and then they have a bumper harvest, and decide for whatever reason politically that they should not pay tax, then you know what you've done is you've shrunk the tax base in terms of the number of people who are then eligible to pay income tax. So you then decide that you should be conscious that the decision you're making is that you're going to get that money back consumption taxes, and that's fine. But at least what you then know is that this is what we've traded off. Subsidized farmers, especially large farmers, because large farmers are the ones who actually have surpluses to sell, and then government gives them a guaranteed return. So you subsidize them, you're giving them a guaranteed return. It means you're redistributing income from lower people to people, large farmers in Kenya. If that is the decision you're making, then it's fine. But you be conscious that you're redistributing income from smaller people to large industrial farmers. If that's the choice, that's okay. But let's be, admit it upfront. The second question that you asked me was about the housing development levy. The economics of housing is this. Modern houses are actually capital intensive. They're not labor intensive. What you're asking me is this. At the Institute of Economic Affairs, analysis of the memorandum that was issued together with this and some of the information that has been issued, that is not the best way to spend public money. So I'll give you an alternative. The alternative that we've done some very hard thinking about it at the Institute of Economic Affairs is, if you scrap the levy fund, well, you get to keep more money perhaps, but if you scrap the housing levy fund, this is what you could do for the same amount of money. Kenya has 40,000 schools. The number of children in schools in the next 11 years is going to double. Today, 15 million children wake up and go to public school. What that means is that there's a serious shortage in school infrastructure in Kenya, which the government of Kenya does well. Whatever we might talk about the quality of education, the government of Kenya historically has done a pretty decent job educating children, creating quite something. So already the Ministry of Education is struggling to actually keep school infrastructure to match the number of children going to schools. So if Parliament chooses to have a school infrastructure development plan and then fund it every year with this amount of money, you actually cover a greater part of the Republic, and you actually do much, much more for the Republic than housing plan, which is 250,000 people. We have 14 million houses. Those houses will definitely go because they're very heavily subsidized, but you're actually, again, redistributing income from low-income people to people who can own condominiums and studios. I don't think that is equitable distribution of cash. So maybe that's an idea to consider. The third question.
On the assumption that the housing fund is what is being used to build the houses, because what you're proposing then is use the fund to now expend it on public school infrastructure.
Yes,
which is actually not the case. Maybe probably, if you don't know, no, the housing fund levy is not being used to construct houses.
No, but the rationale then that means that actually the housing fund is being sold to Kenyans with some misconception, because the idea is if it's the offtake.
We've heard that from the golf courses as a control state. People have all kinds of perceptions and misconceptions.
Yeah. Yes, but if you speak about it as a housing levy and the way we sell it to our colleagues at the Institute of Economic Affairs is, this is your contribution, there's a possibility that you might find the fund. Yeah. I mean, you might find a house. That's the claim that people have. But anyway, regardless of it, if you place personal houses on one side and public schooling on the other, every day public schooling provides greater public value. It's even good for social cohesion, and the cost effectiveness is superior to what you would get from constructing 250,000 houses per year. But let's leave that. Let me go to the third question, coming from Hassan. He asked about where does a default take us to. He's not here, but look, we are Kenyan and we are taxpayers. A default would probably be extremely damaging to everybody. Nobody benefits from a default. Nobody. I don't think anybody benefits from a default at all. So obviously it's a tough thing. But what we suggest for the government of Kenya to say, let Kenyans actually understand the risks. I think the way it's been sold to Kenyans about the payment of the public debt is as if we should be made to be scared. That, look, if you're not too careful and you continue to ask us questions, there'll be a default and you lose your pensions and all this and all that stuff. I think to ensure that, because there's going to be pain regardless, an adult conversation about what the options the government is choosing is the superior alternative. We hope it doesn't come, because we know that even after next year's big ticket payments of the Eurobond, subsequent years will have very significant payments still required. So we think that this burden is one thing. Part of sharing the burden is to treat people with respect. right? Citizens, let's have a conversation around this question in that way. So there are no shortcuts, we agree, but perhaps the tone of the conversation could actually be more conversational as opposed to lecturing people. Then, Honorable Kazango,
Do you think the Kenyan side, sorry to interrupt, would borrow from the Korean example, what we heard from other, where ordinary Koreans were able to say, okay, we're going to pay a public debt, and they contributed over 27 billion. Do you see that happening in this country? Further taxation.
I think that's a good example, but the truth is, Kenyans are still even struggling to buy food. So asking them to contribute to a government public sector kitty to pay for that, and they're paying through taxes. So I think the respect is you pay through taxes. These are difficult times. It doesn't matter whose fault it is, by the way, whether it's the administration, the incumbents, or their predecessors. The point is, we're all here together as Kenyans. We cannot eject from citizenship. Let's all try and hold this thing together. I think that's the point. What could be done at this moment is this. There are 14 million households in Kenya. As we demonstrated, for the lowest 20% of households, their income over the last 1 year has shrunk by 30% relative to the prices of food. Those people need help. So if government wanted to extend help to them by expanding the food subsidy, and it can be distributed very easily through mobile money transfers, this was done. And this is a temporary measure. It is not a permanent one. So your concern about its sustainability is valid. But we could do this for 1 year until we see what happens. It is cheap, 8 billion shillings a month. That is 1 day's collection of revenues based on today's estimates. So that's one thing to consider. It's immediate, it will be extremely helpful, and it will even calm people quite a bit, showing government is here working together with us. Now the 3 mistakes that you mentioned, Honorable, these are not, but these are the ones that we at the IE have tracked. There's no doubt anymore that the SGR and the cost at which it was executed was a monumental mistake. I'll give you an example. The entire revenue that has been generated from the SGR for 6 years is 72 billion. That is not even enough to pay the principal payments that were required. So obviously that's a sinking fund. I think it would have to be treated very, very differently. So that's one. More recently, you see, the food problem in Kenya, I think, is improperly analyzed. The problem with food's availability and food security and cost of living is not that there's no supply, sometimes supply is short, but that households at a certain income level, even if the food was available in the market, their income is, so it's an income problem. The conversation we've gone with so far is to subsidize farmers, and it tends to be farmers who are the ones who got the fertilizer and got the seed, and so they have big stores. But if somebody in a certain market, say, if this was a Bomas village, and their income has not grown for 5 years, that supply does not help. That was another mistake. Then government starts to trade cooking oil. All that money, and we are not questioning the intent, we are questioning the design of these policies. It was improperly designed. The way to do that is actually to support households to be able to consume during a shock such as the one that we saw. But most of the support that government has given are to traders, but more specifically to the supply side. So we might have food stores with 67 million bags of grain, right? But we might not have enough. People might still suffer because they do not have enough money to buy the several kilograms that they need per month. That conversation needs to be reframed. It is a demand side problem, not necessarily a supply side problem anymore. So that was a mistake. The final one is basically the debts. And I think the control of budget has mentioned this, the Office of the Control of Budget has. Look, you cannot run a deficit of 6 to 7% per year, regardless of where you were, for 10 consecutive years as we did in the last administration, not expect to have a problem. It was a matter of when, not if. So I think that Parliament needs to be a little bit more conscious about Treasury selling to you that infrastructure solves all problems. It doesn't. As we can tell, we built a lot of infrastructure, stadiums and all those other things. It's not paying for the debt now. They're still going back to the citizens and getting that money to pay for them. Parliament needs a serious conversation with itself about whether you performed your oversight functions well. And my judgment, with due respect, gentlemen and ladies, is you did extremely poorly.
Thank you.
You must own this problem as well.
Thank you. You hear that, Kimani?
Your Excellency, I hear that, but Kwame will agree with me that within those 10 years we are dealing with a very tyrannical regime, and the controller of budgets will bear me witness. You know what you have to go through.
On a lighter note, just a minute, Eugene.
Yes.
Just as Kimani likes to stretch us backwards, I can tell you for a fact, part of the reason we are sitting here today is because of the integrity issues that the control of the budget spoke about. Even as presently constituted, Kimani's parliament and Wandai's parliament is under capture, state capture. So you shouldn't expect much from them. And this is why we have to really go deep into these things. Even as we are sitting here, I said this is not even for you. My good friend, Speaker Wetangula, goes out there to dismantle Azimio coalition, where speakers rule it. Integrity issues, because he wants to use the 21 members of Jubilee, all right, to be able to carry on to make sure that Kimani's taxes are sustained. Sorry, Kimani.
Your Excellency, you definitely know I take great exception to discussing the Speaker of the National Assembly in this forum, and especially on a matter completely unrelated to the economic issues that we are dealing with. Matters that of grave concern to the people of Kenya. And with all due respect to myself and Nobo Pio and I who sit here, we must give credit to at least the 13th Assembly that we have been bold enough to deal with some of these issues touching on the economy. And I believe history will judge the 13th Assembly different from other assemblies, but also to say, without giving excuse to Parliament, I think is more of a leadership issue than the institution of Parliament. It is about leaders who appreciate the role of institutions, that the controller of budgets is an institution, not the person of Mary Nyakanga, that Parliament is an institution, not the persons who sit in Parliament, and respect those institutions, that they have a role to play in budget making, in helping the government and the executive to deal with matters to do with the economy. Therefore, when the controller of budget tells you that paying Telcom, looting 6 billion shillings 2 days to a general election is not right, don't put a gun over her head. Respect that office of the controller of budget. When Parliament, Your Excellency, because I have sat as a chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, I can tell you, things that some of us had to go through because we put our foot down. Masinda is here, he will tell you.
To continue putting your foot down.
And I will assure you, Your Excellency, Parliament as a leader of majority, I will make sure even this government under William Ruto will have to abide by the Constitution and respect institutions. Therefore, let us not have a blanket condemnation of Parliament. I know we have had this debate for the last 7 years with Kwame on the role of Parliament.
Can I finish in a minute?
Co-chairs.
I think I took the floor from you.
No, co-chairs, I was just proposing we go by only proposal. They finish, then we do a second round, because we have a second round.
Okay. And so the final point, which is basically what you asked for. Honorable Wandai asked, you did not ask me this, but please allow me to just answer. Which specific expenditures do you want to see GOK reduce? Yes. So we will tell you. In the year 2019, the Institute of Economic Affairs was concerned about how much fuel government was buying. So we went through all the parliamentary estimates and went line by line through every purchase of fuel by the public sector, keeping aside the military and the police. And the figure that we found suggested to us that the government of Kenya was buying 150,000 liters of diesel per day from the numbers that Parliament approved for expenditure. That cannot be right. Where are all these vehicles going to? Either that, or government vehicles are pumped with fuel and they just ride around. It was an enormous number. And then we also checked telecommunications. So we checked what telecommunications are, and we find out that certain departments in the public sector have a telecommunications bill of 20,000 shillings per person per month. Now, 20,000 shillings per person per month, per person. So it's not basically for a whole office of 30 people. That's a lot of money. So what I'm trying to suggest here is, if Parliament took its work diligently and went line by line through items, asking, why are we buying this quantity of things, which is what you expected by the Constitution to do, you would find a lot of space for savings without having to have an abrupt cut in any budget, because you will save a lot of money which could be which could be directed to the more important things that we spoke about. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now,
We can now hear the person who guides Parliament in making those decisions.
Thank you, Chair. I want to comment on the 223. My view is that we have a different opinion, members, that Article 223 is not foolproof because it requires parliamentary approval. And my English reading of approval is something very different, that Parliament must be satisfied that that approval is within the law. So we have some proposals in terms of perhaps tightening the PFM law to give specific conditions under which Article 223 is applied. Otherwise, the way it is, Parliament must approve. So the disconnect is that Treasury cannot go ahead and actually spend that money knowing that Parliament, what if Parliament refuses to approve? The leader of majority is way where Waraka was actually, Parliament refused to approve Waraka payment under 223. So I think it's high time we try and look at the PFM. We have some proposals, yes, that can sort of try and tighten the condition under which Article 223 is applied in the PFM.
And everybody knows what happened to me after I refused to approve that payment.
You are suggesting PFM Act, not...
Yes, PFM Act. Yeah. We have some proposals.
Okay.
I don't know, the lawyers can guide, but we have some
We
proposals.
need them. That's important. Yeah. Okay.
And then the second issue is the basic pay. What I said, members, is that if you are earning $1 million shillings, right, and you make it, let's go up. You make it, you make the levy tax deductible, right? It's deducting and minus deducting. The net amount is that for in a month, you will actually, save 25,000 shillings per month. If you make it, sorry, I mean you lose from the baseline where there was no housing levy to the housing levy, making it tax deductible, you lose 25,000 shillings per month. If you make it not deductible, you lose 30,000 shillings per month. So once we just thought perhaps for clarity purpose, just to have some, extra income for this possible for spending, perhaps we need to look at that. Around the administration of this housing levy in terms of taxation, to see whether there is any ambiguity in that. I think that a recent AG's direction that I think, are they directors were not subject to the housing levy. So I think some legal gaps that require to be addressed. I leave the question for dollars to the expert here to help me out. Tax exemptions. What we are saying is that within the East African Community Customs Union, there are some specific loopholes on the government, in the sense that sometimes the minister just through the governing, the minister's council in Arusha, they just grant 2 or 3 entities, and I have a gazette notice here actually, which I don't want to read, just 2 or 3 or 4 entities to exempt them from import duty, because import duty is an ECMA, a customs union issue. You realize, 2 or 3 entities have been given that rebate of not paying import duty. On the basis of that, we're not very sure. So we thought perhaps it is high time we look at this and try and tighten that. Number 2 is that other than perhaps health, agriculture, some of these things don't make sense. Right? Per year. Right? Per year. And development is 30 million. 30 million. 30 million. So essentially, it's as good as perhaps trying to rethink and just closing down that particular entity and trying to mark them. That's the kind of MDS saving we're talking about. That within national government, we've done so well, and perhaps members I'm conflicted, but I think let me say this, that the cutting for foreign travel, domestic travel within national government itself either those transfers or we need to look into the A&A collection. How can we allow some of these people just let them collect A&A and just, why are they relying on exchequer? What they will do, and I think members of the National Assembly know, at the initial stage of the year, in the estimates, they'll understand A&A completely. Towards supplementary, actually, the last parliament to approve a higher collection of A&A. So these are the things we need to perhaps go into the books and see how to deal with those ones.
Now, just a clarification. Please allow me not to disturb you beyond that. Assume you're 60, you retired 60, right? Alright. There are people who are about to retire and who are already having to pay the housing levy. Right? Do they have any hope whatsoever of getting any house? Why don't you then think in terms of the willing? That's why we talk about progressive something, rather than having a blanket application. And these are some of the things that get discussed on golf courses, all right? Because you see, and then the trust element. Can we really trust these people? Well, are they not collecting this money to do other things and just get lost? So since you advise Parliament, have you thought of this? I don't look at Kimani because I don't see Kimani. Just look at me straight.
He's probably looking at me, Your Excellency, because you probably may not understand the nature of the housing levy we are dealing with. It's now a tax. It's an outright tax. And to ask whether someone who is about to retire, whether they should pay tax, is akin to asking you if you are above 60 and you are retired, do you pay for tax that provides health care to other people who are fall sick and you are not sick yourself? And it happens. Or the estate of dead people, they pay taxes to provide services.
Yeah.
And that's why I think if we listen to Arthur Muliro
was very
and the
clear
social
on
contract,
fairness.
the social contract,
Yes.
I think is what should guide us on matters tax, other than our political inclinations. And I would really beg we
No. I think this has nothing to do with a political inclination, Kimani. Arthur was very categorical that the tax regime should be fair, should be seen to be fair. And surely, if you're calling housing levy and people are likely then to get a house, this is a common understanding, the street talk. And then they'll ask you, surely you're paying tax and you're about to retire? And what hope in the world, unless it's your grandchildren, who benefit from this kind of thing? So we need to debunk these things without looking at the political
Excellency, I will invite you because we have the housing department coming tomorrow.
Yes.
Absolutely. I would plead that we leave that matter to them. They will be able to explain to us that the housing tax is not for me to pay a tax to get that house actually. It is a tax. When it was a levy before, at 3% is when that argument then would have held. Okay. Now that argument cannot hold because of the bashing that the levy had, and then it was changed into a tax. And I'm sure Nyaga, who is seated there, who is more on the taxation matters, will be able to explain that better than even Masinde.
Yeah. And then there is a typology of these houses that are restricted to various incomes. And the selling price to the market is restricted also to about, is it 55,000 per square meter? And the government then gives the offtake through that housing fund for those by taking the market risk, because it is done through a PPP program. So you get the land, you structure your financing, you come and build, then there are various incomes in terms of the typology, 20 square meters, 40 square meters, and 60 square meters.
Hassan is very conversant with this. When is the first thing?
That's what I was proposing.
First, we are going to break ground in Mombasa very soon.
Mombasa, you are not actually.
And if you pass the integrity test,
Pakistan is complete. I think we leave the
matter. Why don't we co-chair and deal with it tomorrow?
Yeah, that's I agree with Eugene. Let's deal the housing matter. We have the whole morning tomorrow morning to deal with housing, and I'm sure all of us will have questions to answer.
And we can have Kwame and the rest of the experts.
Yes, you are invited to,
yes,
since it is an open forum.
We wanted to help.
Come and help us.
So the other chair was, actually, our thought was, I agree with you, the lead of majority, actually the RDL was adjusted from 2% to 1.5% in the Finance Act, as well as IDF going down from 3.5%.
RDL, His Excellency is asking, is the Railway Development Levy.
Yeah, these are acronyms.
Yes, yes. It was adjusted.
So just use the RDL, say what it is, because it was your proposal that it be reduced.
Yeah, so we say that the Railway Development Levy was adjusted in the Finance Act from 2% to 1.5%. Downwards, while the import declaration fee was adjusted from 3.5% to 2.5%. But remember, as we are, and our team behind me, you know, as
and also, if I remind you,
yes,
the RDL and IDF for LPG gas was completely removed.
Yes, yes.
And I thought my memory was serving me right. I had to Google and check.
Yeah. So now our immigration was, when you look at August, the landing cost of oil was 108. I think this should be per liter, right? 108 shillings. Huh? In September 21, 15.9. We try to debunk and see what is causing the change, right? Prices, international prices, contribute 46.82% of that cost, right? Now, because the way the Railway Development Levy is applied, so the only change, the extra change, was the Railway Development Levy, which grew by 7.69%, and the Import Declaration Levy, which went up by 7.66%. I'm doing VAT because VAT itself has huge significant contribution to revenues, so I'm not discussing that one. So our proposal, if we looked at some of these small things in a way, because it seems as if the Import Declaration Levy is levied on the CIA, cost, insurance, and flights. So as the price of international prices go up, similarly, this also goes up. So just thinking perhaps if we made it in a way that it no longer perhaps goes in line with the international price and find another way of measuring it, then perhaps it will lessen the burden a bit in terms of the total impact every month going forward.
Yeah, think about that, Masinde, a little harder.
Just a thought against revenue collection that is from those particular heads. Yeah. So allow me, Chair, if you don't mind, to my dollar expert. Those here.
Yes, Nyaga.
Yep, thank you so much.
Omar knows where they are. Let's go get them.
I'm Robert Nyaga from PDO. Thank you, co-chairs, for this opportunity. On the exchange rate, my initial comment is that we need to address the issue about our exchange rate. It's a risk, and it can become systemic going forward. So I think the question was, what are the main causes? The main primary cause is too much imports relative to our exports. The difference between the two, I got some numbers here, is 5.8 billion US dollars, which is about 900 billion, which you have to finance. You have to find new dollars to pay for your imports. And therefore, when you look at the flows of remittances, the flows of other incomes, and exports, the second issue is the US Federal Reserve intervention in the market, basically to address inflation, which was caused by COVID. The inflation in the US was caused by them giving too much money to the public to consume, and therefore they needed to remove that money from the market.
In subsidies?
Yes, in subsidy. So I think also subsidies have a risk if you overdo them. So when they started removing them by increasing interest rates, then what you're seeing is an outflow of capital. This includes money in the stock market or Nairobi Stock Exchange, and also portfolio investments, whereby people are buying bonds and treasury bills, going back to those countries to buy better instruments anyway. For example, if you're an investor and you are in US, what would you prefer to invest in? A US bond or a Kenyan bond? Yes. When the rates are high. So I think that's the issue. So the capital flow, and it's still going on, and that's why I'm saying we need to address this matter. It's still going on in the stock market. The Safaricom today is trading at 12 shillings 50 cents.
down from about 40, I think 2 years ago. Number 3, we have a more developed Nairobi Stock Exchange and a financial market. Our banks are more connected internationally. We actually have Kenya Commercial Bank, Equity, we find them in DRC, in Uganda. We also have a lot of MNCs, multinational corporations here, Coca-Cola, and many others. So when there's a problem in our economy related to fluctuations of our economy or even the dollar, they're more likely to move their money from our economy. So a developed financial market is actually can tend to bring that problem. And you're going to see this, which is similar to South Africa and Egypt. But to less connected economies like Uganda and Tanzania, we don't see such a big effect. And therefore, I'm able then to answer the earlier question, which is why is Kenya relative to Tanzania and Uganda, why is our shilling being worse off? So that is actually the main answer. And the other answer is FDI. FDI flows. The other issue is about speculation.
What about FDI flows?
The FDI flows to Kenya have been lower compared to Tanzania.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, it is clear, isn't it? You'd agree that we have lost our competitive edge to Tanzania. We heard that from the panelists.
Yeah, yes.
Tanzania is more attractive investment destination than Kenya. We should be asking our questions why. Don't justify.
The primary reason is the gas. Yeah, at this point in time, they are doing gas plants. Secondly, they are doing a big railway development. At this time, we did our SGR in 2013-15. But then they are doing it now.
2013 to 2016, yes. And ended up taking it to the bush.
So now, right now what we are seeing is they're doing much better in FDI than Kenya at the moment. I could also explain in terms of food. We import more food than them. Uganda, Tanzania. Let me give another explanation for that. Debt repayments and expectations around debt repayments, particularly the next year's Eurobond, which we took in 2014. Therefore, the markets, I mean, you and me, if you're in the market, you'll be worried about whether the country will be able to repay that that Eurobond, which is dollar-based, and therefore some people may be accumulating some dollars at home or in whichever way, or speculating on them, hoping. And I think this discussion is there. If you're in social media, people expecting the rates to continue worsening. And that's why in my proposal, we have to address the matter of the exchange rate. And finally, let me give the solution, because I just didn't need to just mention the problems that are providing other issues. One, remittances. Remittances is a quick win if we were to do it. And I think the current government is doing enough in terms of trying to airlift more Kenyans to Saudi Arabia and other countries. I think that's a good positive thing, which can help those flows to compensate for our imports. Secondly, address exports. Thirdly, macroeconomic interventions. One, inflation. When you're fighting inflation, you tend to raise interest rates. I would expect that to be helping us, but it seems it's not responding as much. The other issue is growth. If you improve your growth rate, obviously things are going to look better. But finally, Chair, is regulation. Do we have an opportunity to address the whole aspect about regulation? In 2011-12, I was involved in the committee which was addressing the sudden fall of the Kenyan shilling that time. So this problem we had it in 2011-12. Again, Parliament formed an ad hoc committee, a select committee to address this particular matter. So I think this still need to have some discussion going forward on how you can address this matter. Exchange rate is one of the most risky prices if you don't get a hold on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. One additional information to share is that I think from the supply side, we'll be a bit careful to address the supply side for cereals. Total imports, and cereals constitute 14% of total imports for 2022 and 2023 to date. 14% of total imports
from maize to rice.
Maize to rice and everything. So import require dollars. So from the supply side, we also need to address some of these bottlenecks of cereals being gotten from agriculture.
Couldn't agree more, Masinde, and I think it's the same point that Atta was making in terms of enhanced investment in the agricultural sector to make sure that we reduce on agricultural produce. I'd ask a specific question to Kwame, but maybe any one of you could answer. Are there, or is there an opportunity for us in this committee to recommend a quick fix solution to the problems that bedevil our country today in terms of the state of the economy and the cost of living? Or do we just maintain sustainable medium to longer term solutions that will give us a more sustainable way of managing our economy? Because I think, and it's out there in the public domain, people expecting that there can be a quick fix solution at the snap of a finger. Is there such a solution? Because as a student of economics, I do not know of any. Maybe from where you sit,
you may find one, but don't worry.
Your Excellency, I'm talking about quick fix economic solution, not political ones.
I thought we heard of one, by the way, from the controller budget, and I think when it comes to doubling the 2,000 to 4,000, because we're talking about having people have food on the table, basically. Perhaps, in fact, the most vulnerable, the elderly citizens thing. So that's one thing. So let's not be pessimistic, Kimani. While Kwame tries to answer your question, he didn't answer mine. He didn't answer mine. Why is it the prices of macadamia and coffee and things are? I put it to him that time. Thank you.
You did.
Thank you, Coach. I just wanted to add before Kwame responds. I think part of the reason why we're here is because we have a crisis in our country, and we call you as experts to look at possible solutions, short term, medium, and long term. So we would, even as you guide us, would like to look at what can be done immediately to give Kenyans some relief. And we did it. I mean, when we were in the middle of the COVID crisis, it wasn't just a health crisis, it was a financial crisis. So the taxes that we were able to review at the time, I've referred to them. But also there were things that we did, and some of them Kwame has referred to, particularly in terms of what can be done in the education sector. What we did, we had about 10 billion that went to, Kazi Mitani, the youth. We also were able to allocate, I think it was about 6.5 billion that also went to the education sector. Construction of classrooms, desks, putting money in the pockets of young people across the country. And I think that pushed a lot of people. So we are not just looking at the long term. The short term we're talking about, maybe our colleagues in Kenya Kwanza are very passionate about the affordable housing. We were equally passionate actually in the last administration because Uhuru Kenyatta's Big Four agenda, housing was a key pillar, and everybody was very passionate. But the reality of the circumstances was that we're in a crisis. That can be postponed, it can be done later. And we were able to do that. So the issue of this housing levy being turned into a tax, I think is the most oppressive task. Most Kenyans are saying, we already have mortgages, we can hardly take home a third of our salaries. Imposing this tax on us, and you are forced to pay, it's very oppressive. If there are other ways, my late brother Mike used to say, a good idea can give way to a better idea. If Kwame, and this is very refreshing, the brainstorming we're having, to have new ideas, that we don't have to be fixated on this housing thing, because the main agenda for Kenya Kwanza was really, they were saying it's not about housing, it's about creating jobs. I think that this has been the argument. There can be another way of creating jobs. And these are some of the suggestions you are giving us. And I think they're going to benefit our analysis in terms of the way forward. I would also just ask the budget team from Parliament. We heard from the control of budget the issue of the inflated salaries. Is this what we've been hearing about, budgeted corruption, where the inflations? We heard from Kwame talking about, the fuel, more than can be consumed. The budgeting people, I mean, you can guide us. Is this what we are hearing about, budgeted corruption? And what can be done to make a saving from this so that we are able to push on Kenyans? Lastly, the issue of FDI is very worrying that we are lagging behind our sister countries like Tanzania and others. We know that our Kenya Kwanza colleagues have said the blitz, the global trips, and I'm told it's a record. In 1 year, 38 trips. I think back in 10 years did 32 trips. Can you probably in the last 1 year give us maybe an indication in terms of contribution to the FDI, foreign direct investment, improvement in this period of this administration? Are you in a position to give us that figure? And lastly, in terms of the global examples we were given by Muliro, which one would you recommend for Kenya? Because we are looking at we are in a crisis. We need to see how to get out. Thank you.
Okay, Omar, second one. Maybe Omar, before you go, Eugene, you may benefit from the knowledge that His Excellency at one point was Minister for Foreign Affairs and President Kibaki, I think.
Yeah. If you need my expert opinion on that, I will.
I was just saying that because you're comparing Kibaki's trips and we also know the conditions.
But also, if you look at the onset years of Uhuru Kenyatta, he did 35 trips in 1 year. Because, in fact, even the Economist wrote an article, Kenyans mocking their visiting president because he was never in the country. I think people try to build relations and see whether they can have a significant inflow. I can tell you some of the bilaterals that have been signed and other countries already on the ground, like Malaysia, to invest in the special economic zone. They're already on the ground to invest in CPO. Kenya probably will be the biggest distributor of CPO in the next couple of years because they're doing the tankage and they've done the feasibility. They think we have the leverage of the East African community, 300 million population, and by definition, the African free trade. Anyway, these are things that are real.